Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, August 12th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to start with my preseason top 25. The AP poll releases later today, so I thought I'd beat him to the punch and release my top 25 before we get there. Definitely a very, very interesting poll coming out today, so thought I would just give you my official preseason top 25 as we head into this year. Then we'll get into some roster changes that have been noticed by some NFL scouts that I want to get into. Could be the ones that end up deciding this national title, and a couple of big-time examples of that throughout the country, so we'll get into that after in the second segment. Then we'll get to the biggest leap that title contenders need to take. We got into this last week with the Big Four, as I'm calling them: Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon. We have 6 more teams for you today, so we'll get into that right in the third segment. Then we'll have a little bit of fall camp intel. Some scrimmages happened around the country, but also just some stuff from the late last week that we didn't have quite a chance to get to. Then we'll finish it out with Monday questions. We'll get to week 1 part 2, and this time around we have some big time questions that I'd love to answer for this. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and we also have a super chat now, which is the easier way for you all to show your support for the channel. Absolutely a huge help to us, but also to you all. We get to kind of have a fun interactive experience here, see your name, see your question on the screen. It's always fun for the both of us. So if you look down at the bottom of the chat there on the Sports Network site, you'll see a little $sign. If you would like to click that, add a question, add a little $1 or $2, that would be absolutely incredible for us. I think it would be very, very fun for you all as well. Make this a little bit more interactive. So if you'd like to use that, the super chat is right there for you. Also, we still have the gsmcpodcast.net site if that's a little bit easier for you as well. So either one of those, more than welcome to use, and it'll pop up on the screen. We can have a fun back and forth here. But let's go ahead and jump into this thing because the AP poll comes out today. We are 12 days out from football officially kicking off. I count down to week 0. I understand that some people count down to week 1, but when you have a game like Florida State against Georgia Tech in Ireland in week 1, or week 0, I feel like week 0 is where you want to count down to. So we're 12 days out, at least by my counter. We're 12 days out, and so I wanted to release my official preseason top 25. We'll get the AP poll a little bit later today, I believe at noon Eastern, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see exactly what everyone else thinks. But I'm going to give you my top 25. This is not what I think the AP poll is going to be, because there are a couple of little things in here that I think are going to be different once it does come out. But this is just the way that I see it. And I have a couple of little ers and ahs here that could be a little bit different than what some people are expecting. So let's start with 11 to 25. That tends to be the easiest place to start, and we'll work our way up. And we'll start at 25. Iowa State is a team that I just don't think is getting quite enough respect as we head into the season. I've seen a lot of top 25s with Arizona slot into that spot or Kansas slot into that spot. I think Iowa State's better than both of them. I think they're more experienced. I think they have 2 wide receivers that are just outright incredible with Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, and I think they have plenty of players to make tons of plays. Right above them is their foe, Iowa. Definitely some interesting things that came out of that scrimmage yesterday that I'll break down likely tomorrow after we get through the number of things we have to get through today. But that was definitely not the greatest sign for Iowa's offense. But again, we'll get to that tomorrow. This is a team that has as good of a defense as you can find across the country, an incredible linebacker duo this year, an incredible back-end duo. They're going to be more than fine on that side of the ball. If they can take a step forward on the offensive side of the ball, which it doesn't look great right now, but let's say if they do, they can definitely find their way into the Big Ten conversation. NC State is a team that I really love, but they're relying on the transfers, as everyone kind of does at this point in time. Grayson McCall under center, Jordan Waters by his side at running back, Noah Rogers and Justin Jolie on the outside catching passes. All 4 of those guys really need to hit for this offense to be as dangerous as they can be. Virginia Tech right above them, a team that I've been very, very open about being really into. Absolutely love this team. Kyron Jones is one of the most fun, athletic quarterbacks you will find across the country. They returned tons of production and talent, added someone like Anais Peebles over from Duke, so did a great job, and I feel like they are a dangerous team in the ACC this year for sure. USC is a polarizing team around the country, obviously, with that defensive play. I think they did enough. I think they did a great job rebuilding this staff. The personnel is not quite where you want it to be, but it's further along than some people I think are giving it credit for. So I do think they have guys to make plays, and then the offense is going to be incredible. The wide receiver core with Jacoby Lane, Deuce Robinson, and many more guys is going to be an absolute problem for so many people. So really like that team offensively. Defensively, I might like them a little bit more than some other people do. Oklahoma State at 20, I think, is a team that you know what you're going to get. You're going to get a lot of Ollie Gordon pretty much all day. Alan Bowman is the one that really decides where the season goes. However, he's the one that if he can limit the interceptions, limit the turnovers that he had a year ago, this is going to be a really dangerous team that could be exactly where they were a year ago playing for that Big 12 title. Oklahoma right above them, they have the two big questions, right? The offensive and defensive line. Feels like the defensive line is coming along a little bit faster than some people expected. The offensive line, not so much. So they'll have to figure that out a little bit and see what happens there. Also, Jackson Arnold struggling with a little bit of turnover trouble, but we'll see what happens throughout the season. A&M, one of the most talented teams in the country. Obviously, the new staff adds a little bit different element to this year, but they got plenty of people all across the field that can make big-time plays for them. There's no two questions about that. Kansas State has one of the most dangerous trios in any backfield across the country with Avery Johnson, DJ Giddens, and Dylan Edwards. All of those guys are going to be absolutely huge, and you have J.C. Brown on the outside to make a ton of different plays. I love the cornerback duo they have. This is going to be a really good team that could easily end much higher than 17, could easily be in the playoff as I have them. Miami has so many things heading their way this upcoming season. They're definitely a team that is going to be super dangerous this year. Obviously, the transfers haven't come into place, but it sounds like they are pretty quickly, so it'll definitely be a huge year for them. I wasn't comfortable putting them too high, but definitely a team that could be put higher, and I would have no real argument with you. LSU comes in at 15. This is a team that obviously the defense is the big question, but you have the staff changes to help that out a little bit. The O-line play is going to be as good as you've ever seen it across college football, and then I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be really incredible. The talent at wide receiver is much better than some people are giving it credit for. I understand they just lost 2 first-round guys, but they got plenty of guys right behind them that are going to be able to make plays. I promise you that. So I'm not necessarily worried about this LSU team as many as other people are, very much buying into what they can do this year. Tennessee is the team that pretty much everyone's talking about in the SEC. Nico Iamaleava, elite wide receivers all across the field, and the best pass rusher in probably the country in James Pierce Jr. So plenty of talent on that team. This could be the year where they repeat 2022 without that injury at quarterback towards the end of the season. So could be a special year for Tennessee. A lot of things going in the right direction, and if they hit this year, it might be hard to stop them going forward. Clemson, I get higher on day by day. It feels like that wide receiver talent, although it is freshmen that I've talked about, I'm a little bit wary about. It seems like the talent is just off the charts, and if you can make plays, you can make plays. Doesn't matter how old you are. Cade Klubnik is obviously the one that is going to have to come quite a long ways, more than anything else, to get them to the place that they want to be. A very talented kid that I think is more than capable of it, but needs some strides here pretty soon. You have a Missouri team that is 11-2, or coming off an 11-2 season, returning a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive, not so much. They did do a good job of filling some of the holes on that team, but I am a little bit worried about that defense as we head into the season. I think they have the best offensive player in the country in Luther Burden, so I think they'll be more than fine, but if there's something that could torpedo this, it is the defensive side of the ball. Then you have Michigan at 11, just missing out on the top 10. The QB situation continues to take shape, but overall, I'm still a little bit worried about them offensively. I think the defense is going to be elite. I have very few questions there. The back end might be a little bit of a worry, but overall, I'm not necessarily super worried there. Interior defensive line is going to be as good as there is across the country, so they're going to have plenty at their disposal, plain and simple. There's no two ways about that, but that's my 11 to 25. Definitely a very narrow, a list that can definitely bounce around quite a bit. A list that, you could have a couple of teams slotted a couple of different ways, and I really wouldn't argue with you too much. There's definitely some mobility here, but let's get into my top 10 as I see it, and let's start with the Florida State Seminoles. I think this is a team that, again, another team that I get higher and higher on as we get close to the season, because it sounds like DJ is starting to come along a little bit further in that offense than I once had thought he would. Obviously, nothing really matters until we put toe to the leather and really get going this year. But Florida State is going to be an incredible team, a really, really awesome defense. They'll have plenty at their disposal to play really good football this year. And then you have a Penn State team that I think has a ton at their disposal. The pass rush that they're going to have is going to be absolutely out of this world. They did a great job replacing guys like Kalen King and Johnny Dixon through the portal. Brought in A.J. Harris from UGA, who's going to be a huge player for them. The big thing here is that guy in the picture. If Drew Aller can hit, this team is really dangerous. He has so much arm talent. He has so much ability, but when he can play in those big-time games, that is the big-time issue, right? That's the one where you turn on those games when you're used to seeing Penn State play really clean football, and they look like they don't really belong on the field with the other team. And that's the big-time stretch they need to make this upcoming year. In fact, we'll talk about that in a couple of segments here. But definitely a team that has a lot of danger to it. Definitely a team that can make a lot of noise. But still some questions there that you'd like to have a little bit more firm of answers on as you head into the season. Utah, I have at number 8. I think this is a very, very undervalued team just because they're very not variable. That was a weird sentence, but you know what I'm saying. There's definitely not a lot of variance here for what can happen as long as that guy's on the field. Cam Rising is one of those guys that whenever he's on the field, they win conference titles. That's just kind of the way it's gone the last couple of years, but last year obviously had the injury trouble, has had it really throughout his career, and if he can come back full strength, be on the field the entire year, this is going to be a really hard team to beat, plain and simple. Now, that's a big question mark, and we'll get into that in a couple of segments here, but let's continue on here. Notre Dame is a team that the defense is going to be out of this world. When you have Howard Cross, Riley Mills up in the interior, you have Xavier Watson, Benjamin Morrison on the back end, you're going to be really impressive. There's no two ways about that. The offense seems to be making the strides that you needed to make. Riley Leonard is taking full ownership of the offense. It sounds like Chris Mitchell is having a very, very good fall camp as he comes in from FIU, so plenty of talent. There's no two ways about that. It feels like a lot of things are coming into place. The tackle positions are still a little bit of a worry, but we'll see what happens this year. But Notre Dame absolutely has their sights on a national title. Ole Miss is the team that everyone's watching as we head into this year. So many different transfer guys coming in and one of the more talented rosters in the entire country. But can they put it all together is the big-time question. Can Lane Kiffin, can Pete Golding especially, put everything together on that defensive side of the ball and make sure everyone's ready to roll? It'll be really interesting to watch. And the only real reason I have Bama at 5 over Ole Miss is because I feel a little bit more solid about that defensive side of the ball. Now, overall, I don't necessarily feel overly great about either of them. I do think both are going to be good, don't get me wrong, but when you're talking about the difference between, the top 5 or top 6 team, it's razor thin, and I think Alabama has that interior defensive line. I think they have some of that stuff a little bit more set in stone. Not to say Ole Miss is any less talented, but when you have a lot of transfers coming in, there's always that question. Then you get to the top 4, and it's the top 4 we've always talked about. I have Texas at number 4 right now. The only real reason I don't have them at number 3 is that injury to CJ Baxter. I think that's a huge one for this team as they head into the season. So I do have Oregon at number 3. I think this is a very dangerous team, upgraded pretty much all over the field this offseason, and is going to be as dangerous as they come. Ohio State at 2, I think the only real difference between them and Georgia at number 1 is the quarterback under center. I think Carson Beck just has to make you feel much more confident than what Will Howard is right this second. That could change fairly quickly, but at the end of the day, I do have Georgia number 1. I do think they have the best quarterback in the country. I think the defense is going to be more than fine and be a little bit closer to what we've come used to around Georgia, and the offense is as elite as you've ever seen it in Athens. So overall, it's a really, really hard group to put together. When you talk about the top 25, between 11 and 25, it's an absolute nightmare. There's so many different teams with so many different variables as we head into the season, and it's another reason why the season's going to be so incredible. So just cannot wait to get this thing underway. I mean, there's so many different things to look forward to in this upcoming season, the new playoff format, realignment, all of the different things happening this upcoming season, but we're 12 days out from it all being a reality. We're 12 days out from everything really coming into shape, and then 19 days out from everyone really kicking off and things getting interesting. So that's my top 25 for now. We will absolutely update it throughout the season, but definitely a really fun season, and we're heading in with a ton of hype around so many different teams. So cannot wait for that, but let's take our first break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the roster changes that some scouts in the NFL are starting to notice be more and more important as they're scouting kids, and as you see some of the big-time teams make runs in the college football playoff or just in general in college football in a year, maybe these things are what you need to be watching for. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. I just gave my top 25 as we head into this season. The AP poll will come out a little bit later today and you can compare it to what I have, but definitely going to be a crazy season. Wanted to get my top 25 out there before we really kick things off. Before we jump into segment 2, I do want to remind you all, excuse me for 2 seconds. I do want to remind you all we do have the Super Thanks feature now on the Sports Network channel. If you're on there, you'll see a little $sign at the bottom of your chat symbol. If you'd like to leave a question, if you'd like to leave a comment, anything like that, please use that feature and it will absolutely pop up on the screen. We can have a fun back and forth here. It's always a huge help to us, but also to you all to have a kind of fun interactive experience here. Again, if you cannot use that or you would not like to use that, we do still have the gsmcspodcast.net site that you're more than welcome to go to. So either of those will absolutely do. But let's jump into segment 2 here and let's talk about some of the roster trends to watch this year. There are so many different things happening around this time of year as we get closer to the season. And one of the big time things happened in Nashville this past week. And it was something that, it was a symposium that came together with all of the recruiting and personnel directors all around the country. So all of the GMs, all the recruiting directors, everything in between was all in Nashville. And they were all talking about kind of what's the best way to go forward as we head into this new era of college football, and also heard from a lot of NFL scouts and things of that nature to see, what should we be looking for in specific players, what positions should we be looking for, which is something we'll get into here in a second. So this had a lot of different things to it, and one of the biggest things that everyone started to notice was this is more NFL based than it ever has been before. They brought down way more NFL scouts, way more people from the NFL ranks to help them figure out how to go about business, because it's something that a lot of teams are just now getting used to. In the NFL, you're always scouting pretty much every guy across the league, because the reality is those guys could come available at any moment. Some of those guys you don't really have to scout because Justin Jefferson is very good. You don't necessarily have to worry about that one. If he comes on the table, you absolutely will toss your hat into the ring. But you're keeping track of a lot more guys because those guys become available at any given moment. That's now the reality in college football. With the transfer portal, with all of the different stuff going on, you now have the ability to kind of open that door and say, we're not just going to scout, the guys in our room. We're not just going to scout the recruits that are coming in. And we're not even just going to scout the guys that are already in the portal. We got to scout these guys way before then, because reality is most of these recruiting battles in the portal are decided before the name has gone in, which is a totally different conversation, but before the name has ever gone in, or about 30 an hour hour and a half right after it did go in. It very rarely drags out for too long, so you have to be ready to roll. You have to be ready to recruit that guy pretty much the second his name hits the portal, or before that, but again, beside the point. There's a ton of different stuff that goes into this, and we got to hear from a number of different people. Craig Bohl is the leader of the AFCA, the people that put on this event, a former legend at Wyoming and a number of different colleges, a really, really incredible football coach. You had former NFL executive Mike Tannenbaum spoke, so a lot of people that have the experience of an NFL background coming down and giving you guys an idea that college football is more like the NFL than it ever has been, and it's not necessarily going anywhere. So you have to be equipped to, scout 3,000 current college athletes. You have to make sure that you are fully up to par with all of these different guys, because say a linebacker from Bowling Green hits the portal and you don't know too much about him. Well, someone else across the road, in your conference would know about him and would be able to recruit him before you even get a shot to. So that's kind of the big thing that really is more in administration more than anything else, figuring out, new positions for people to walk into, new ways for people to impact different universities, and it's going to look more and more like the NFL pretty much every single year, because this is just the reality of this sport, and it's one of those things that when you have, the NFL right up there to kind of teach you the ways of this, you're absolutely going to take advantage of that. So that was a huge part of this event, where in the past it's been a lot of college like administrators and that type of thing talking to other college administrators. Now it was more NFL talking to the college football group and letting them know, how to handle this very uncertain world from our point of view. But another thing that happened was they kind of highlighted specific positions, said that these are really high importance positions and you might not peg them as that, but they absolutely are. And the biggest one was, that is Courtney Morgan, the GM. He is hugely important for the future of college football. Another kind of addition to this NFL-type model in college football as we head forward. But the positions that they really went into were interior defensive line was the big-time one. As we saw last year with those two guys on the screen, T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy over at Texas, they can change games. Plain and period. If you have two guys on the interior of that defense that are going to be able to make plays pretty much down in and down out, it's going to be really hard for any team to get into a rhythm. And it's something that they talked about where, you can scheme around a good defensive end. You roll the pocket the other direction. You make sure you slide extra protection that way. There are a number of things you can do to handle a really talented edge rusher, maybe like James Pierce Jr. There are a number of ways you can at least stifle him. You can't necessarily do that with T'Vondre Sweat. You could double him, you're more than welcome to, but then you're taking attention away from someone else. But also, he's right in the center of that defense. If you're not using the center of the defense in the run game at some point, you're not going to be successful, plain and simple. So you can't necessarily scheme around a T'Vondre Sweat, a Byron Murphy, a Mason Graham up in Michigan. Those guys can't be avoided. They're going to make their plays because at some point you're going to have to run inside zone and that person's going to get dominated at the line of scrimmage. So overall, it's one of those things that we talk all about edge rushers and getting the quarterback on the ground, and that's hugely important. But the reality is, if you can get the push interior, if you can get the push from the defensive tackles on the guards of the offensive line and collapse that pocket a little bit, the sacks will come. There's no two ways about that. The sacks will find their way to happening, and Texas did struggle with that a little bit last year, but I promise you, they would have struggled much, much more if those two guys were not on the field. In fact, it would have been a very poor showing from that defensive line. So when you look at the groups that have happened over the last couple of years, Braden Fisk was a huge, huge piece for that Florida State defense down the stretch, especially down the stretch, where he just played incredible football and made them essentially win a number of the games that they won down that stretch of that season. So a very, very talented guy, someone that absolutely is going to play a huge part at the next level and played a huge part for that team as well. So whether it's, getting those difference makers at nose tackle, at, your defensive tackle, or even at some of the edge kind of hybrid positions, you're going to have an ability to affect the game in a way that maybe an edge rusher that just gets pushed up the field doesn't necessarily have the same ability to. So looking at this year and who could kind of pull that off, Michigan obviously has the best defensive tackle duo in the entire country. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are as athletic, as dominant as you can possibly find in the country. They are absolutely incredible, and frankly, I think it's going to be nearly impossible for anyone to stop them. I'm being totally honest. I think Texas going up there in week 2 might have the best shot, and I think they're going to struggle just a little bit. I don't necessarily think it'll be too ugly, but it'll definitely be a handful, that's for sure. And then you look over at South Bend. You have Riley Mills. You have Howard Cross. Two very, very talented guys that could be the difference between Notre Dame winning a couple of games and losing a couple of games this upcoming year, like it was with Texas and Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. So it's incredible how big of an effect these defensive tackles can have. When you look at what they, do on a down-by-down basis, it doesn't look like the craziest thing in the world. It doesn't look like they're having the biggest effect in the world, but they are the most important when it comes to when you can play elite defensive line. Everything else comes into play. If you can get push on the interior, your edge rushers can get there a little bit easier. If your edge rushers can get there a little bit easier, the ball is forced out of the quarterback's hands a little bit faster than possible, and if that happens, your back end can make more plays. So all of this kind of plays together, and those interior defensive linemen is where it all starts. So Michigan, obviously, Notre Dame obviously has elite. Ohio State has elite guys. Alabama has elite guys. Ole Miss seems to have elite guys. So they should have no problem there, and definitely could be teams that you might just want to watch a little bit closer as teams that could make some noise because of that interior defensive line play. The other position that they went after, the other position that they circled as hugely important in today's college football, is a very high IQ safety. They very, very much need a very high IQ safety on the back end of that defense, because you look at all the schemes that are thrown at you. You look at all the different things that are thrown at you from a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis in the college football world. You got to be ready to roll. You have to make sure that you have someone on the back end that can identify, if this guy slots over, if this guy moves from the slot to the outside, they're audibling to this, and he can communicate that to everyone on the back end. That is so important in a day and age where you have so many passing offenses, and frankly, I think you're going to have a couple more that go a little bit faster pace this upcoming year, and you're going to have to make sure everyone's aligned, so that safety becomes that much more important. Someone like Xavier Watts is absolutely huge. I think there's so many different things that he needs to have in place and needs to be the absolute leader of this back-end defense if they're going to make some plays this year. Now, he's one of the best defensive players in the entire country, so it's no two worries about that. I don't necessarily think they're worrying about his high IQ up there, but at the end of the day, there are a number of different things that come into play here. I think you have a number of different players that can make that big-time impact. I think you have Caleb Downs right there at Ohio State. He's going to be able to make plays. There's no two ways about that, and frankly, even with a back end that was already going to be incredible with so many great guys, adding someone back there like Caleb Downs just to make everything fit perfectly is as valuable of a piece for Ohio State as anyone this upcoming year. So, huge for him. Another thing that was talked about in this piece by Andrew Ivins, I don't know if I said that earlier, but Andrew Ivins over at CBS did a great piece about this. But he was talking about how important it is to get all of the, especially for safeties, make sure that they are in place before they get to college. From a tackling perspective, from the raw, just knowing the foundations of their position perspective, you got to know before you get into the college ranks, because it comes at you very quickly, and if you want to have an effect like Caleb Downs did his freshman year at Alabama, you got to come in as a complete tackler. You got to come in ready to roll and not be, a little bit iffy on that side of the ball. So that'll be a really interesting thing to watch. And then Malachi Starks is as good as it gets when it comes to this respect, when it comes to high IQ safeties that are on the back end and can make plenty of plays. He is that guy. He is very, very talented and could really help out a back end for Georgia that just doesn't look quite as strong as you would like it to look as they head into the season. Iowa has Isaiah Nwankpa. Alabama has Malachi Moore. There's plenty of examples around the country of big-time safeties that will make some plays this year. So overall, I think you look at those positions, and overall, safety and interior defensive line are not the sexiest positions in the world. We all understand that. I don't think that's a secret by any means, but they make all the difference. It's another reason why Texas really needs to figure out that interior defensive line, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. But there are so many different things that need to happen for some teams, and if they don't, it could be the difference between a title and not making the playoffs. So that'll be a really interesting thing to watch. Having stability at the interior defensive line, having stability on the back end at a safety position makes all of the difference in college football today and could put you in a good position to get drafted in the future. But definitely will be an interesting thing to watch. Let's take our second break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the biggest leap that needs to be taken by title contenders. We talked about the big four teams on the first segment. Now we got 6 more teams for you that I want to break down right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the different things going on in the recruiting world and some of the different things the scouts in the NFL are looking for, and it could just inform your decision of who's going to win a national title. It sounds like defensive tackles and safeties are more important than they ever have been, so if your team feels good about those two positions, you might just have a shot at the national title. But let's get into segment 3 here, and let's talk about the biggest leap that needs to be taken for title contenders from the 2023 season. So these are people that will compete this season, not necessarily just 2023 contenders, but what leap they need to take, what thing needs to change for them to really be successful this upcoming season. And the first one is one that frankly might already be fixed, if I'm being totally honest with you. The Alabama O-line play has to be a ton better. There's no two ways about that. This is what kept Jalen Milroe from walking into the end zone in Pasadena and sending Alabama to the national title. Caden Proctor got absolutely blown up on that play, and Jalen Milroe had absolutely nowhere to go. There were a number of different things wrong with that play, but that was the number one. When you have an offensive line that gets absolutely destroyed on a play, you got no shot. That's just the reality. So that can't happen again. I think Alabama fans fully understand that this is going to be a run-first offense and a very run-heavy offense, and they're going to have to make sure that that offensive line is ready. Now, the good news is they have a lot of really good players on this offensive line. I think the only real worry is that left tackle position, but you look in, or not left tackle, right tackle position, excuse me, but you look at the interior and it's ridiculous. Tyler Booker is the guy that I think is one of the most pure athletic guys in the entire country and is going to be an absolute monster for many years on Sundays. You have Parker Brailsford coming in from Washington, has to make Bama fans feel a little bit better about the snaps that they're going to get in the comparative to last year. You have Jaden Roberts on the other side of things. It's going to be dominant on the interior. I feel fairly confident about that. Maybe there's a little bit of worry about Parker Brailsford getting along the way that you need him to, but overall, I'm not worried by any means. The duo they have at guard is probably the best in the entire country, and when you add someone like Parker Brailsford that was the center of the Joe Moore Award-winning O-line a year ago, I don't necessarily think you have to worry. So the big-time worry is Elijah Pritchett taking over for J.C. Latham at right tackle. That's the one that everyone is watching and will definitely be one that could hurt them in the long run. Overall, this looks like a really, really good offensive line. It looks like one that if it was an issue last year, it's not going to be one this year. And it needs to not be an issue because Jalen Milroe needs more time. If he's going to be successful, he could have made all the strides in the world and be a really, really good quarterback in practice and throwing against air and feeling really good. If that offensive line can't block, he's not going to be able to do anything, plain and simple. So that offensive line needs to take a step forward. Obviously, the offensive tackles need to be the big part of that, but overall, it looks like a really good unit, one of the top in the country, so I'm not overly worried about that, but do need to take that step forward from 2023. Ole Miss is kind of the same vibe. It's line of scrimmage play, more broadly line of scrimmage play. The offensive line is not where you want it to be. Just overall, they have 3 guys coming in as portal entries that will likely be starters. 2 guys coming in from Washington, Nate Kalepo and Julius Ballou, and then you have Diego Pounds over at left tackle. It sounds like it could be Julius Ballou at the right tackle position and Nate Kalepo at left guard. Definitely will be a really interesting thing to watch. Overall, this offensive line was just not good last year, and it kept them from, honestly, they could have made the SEC title. They could have done a lot more last year, but that offensive line did not give Jackson Dart the time to dice up defenses the way that he is absolutely capable of being. So I think this is a really talented group. I think they did a great job upgrading. Overall, I don't feel great about this unit right now if on the offensive side of the ball, but I think the talent is there and it will definitely come along as the season gets underway. Then you have the defensive side of the ball, and you got a huge boost adding that guy right there, Walter Nolan, a very, very talented player. Princely Emmanuel through the portal as well. Huge Chris Hardy as well. They did a great job filling this big-time hole. J.J. Pegues and Jared Ivey are the veterans there that will have to make big-time plays. It feels like they upgraded a ton. It feels like the talent, or I know the talent level is a lot higher than it was a year ago, and they feel like they have the guys to make some big-time plays. Everything's got to come together, as we all know, but definitely will be one of those things that it'll be kind of a fun case study of you have O-line problems, you have D-line problems. Can you fix them in one offseason? It'll be a very interesting thing to watch, and Oxford might be the best example, other than Boulder, Colorado, for this upcoming season. Notre Dame needs players on the outside. This is the worst kept secret in college football at this point. Notre Dame needs more wide receivers, and they did a good job filling that need through the portal. Chris Mitchell coming in from FIU is absolutely huge, a very, very talented player that likely will be the wide receiver 1 this year for this team. You also have Bo Collins coming in from Clemson, definitely helps this rotation. Jaden Thomas is getting big-time reviews from fall camp, and I think Jaden Greathouse is someone that frankly, I think has the highest ceiling of anyone in that room. He just happens to be a sophomore while some others are seniors. So I think that guy is very, very talented. Expect a big-time leap from him. It does really help that they do have Mitchell Evans on the outside. It does help that Mitchell Evans is one of the best tight ends in the country, and although you definitely need more from the wide receiver group, that definitely takes a little bit off their shoulders as well. Overall, you look at the group, it's a much more talented group. There's no two questions. It is night and day more talented than it was a year ago at that wide receiver group. Riley Leonard is a more than capable passer, probably not quite as good as Sam Hartman was a year ago, but I think the O-line could be a little bit better this year, although the tackle positions are getting me a little bit scared right about now. It'll be one of those things that a lot of this will depend on the O-line. A lot of this will depend on how good Riley Leonard is. But at the end of the day, when you have difference makers on the outside, just getting him the ball and letting him play is obviously a very, very fun thing and something Notre Dame has not had in quite some time. Moving on to Utah, it's just health or depth at quarterback. It's really that simple. Cam Rising, we've talked about this 10,000 different times, if I'm being totally honest, but Cam Rising is about as important to his team as any quarterback is across the country, and it's for a number of different reasons. We saw what happened last year, which is a huge reason, obviously, but this kid is remarkably talented. He makes every right play, and the guys behind him, at least last year, were good. You know, Bryson Barnes made some plays, Nate Johnson made some plays, but neither of them did what you needed them to do on a consistent basis. Now, I do think they did a good job kind of filling a depth piece that they needed here and adding Sam Heward from Washington, a very good pickup, a guy that was a very highly touted recruit, can really throw the ball around the field, and might be a little bit better of an option than what they had a year ago as far as backups go. But at the end of the day, you look at this team, they go as far as Cam Rising goes, plain and simple. They go as far as that guy is on the field, and if he's healthy, they're more than fine. If he's not healthy, they might be in a little bit of trouble. I think the depth is a little bit better than a year before, but at the end of the day, it comes down to health. If this guy is on the field, this is one of the more dangerous teams in the country and absolutely can be a playoff team. If he's not, then I would be shocked if they were a playoff team. I'll just leave it at that for the time being. But let's move on to Penn State. And the biggest thing here is just composure. It's kind of a hard thing to pin down, obviously, but if anyone's been watching Penn State over the last couple of years, you've seen what they do in big games. They shrink. They pretty much crumble under the pressure, and one team looks like they know exactly what they want to do. Penn State is not that team, so they definitely have a couple of games this year that could pose that trouble. Ohio State coming to town obviously is going to be huge. Going to LA to play USC is not going to be easy, and even in week 1 in Morgantown, which is another one we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, but definitely will be a really interesting thing. Drew Aller is obviously the biggest piece here. When your quarterback is composed, everyone else feels a little bit better about the day, so it'll be definitely really interesting to watch that. I think when you look at the games in the past, it's been a lot of that. It's been a lot of Ohio State fans, or Ohio State players, all over Penn State players. It's been a lot of dominance at the line of scrimmage, just a lot of not enough physicality from a team that absolutely has the guys to be that physical. So I think that's the big thing for Penn State, just walk into these environments not afraid. Walk into these environments knowing that you absolutely can win those games. And it's not to say that they're actively walking in afraid and chattering their teeth by any means, but it is to say when they're playing in those games, there is a noticeable difference between those two teams. And a lot of it just comes down to composure in big-time moments. So I think that's the big-time thing for Penn State. If Drew Aller can be comfortable in that pocket, if they can not panic when they go down by 7 late in the third quarter, they're going to be more than fine. They're going to be a really, really good team. But if they can make that leap and really make a big-time leap there, this is a playoff team and a very dangerous team this upcoming year. Finally, we'll get to Florida State, and it's just offensive consistency. I think you look at the 2023 season, they did so many incredible things on the offensive side of the ball. There's no two ways about that. They did incredible, incredible things with some really good athletes. But also, you look at a couple of the games, mainly Clemson and Florida are the two games that I'm really zeroing in on here. The two games, Florida and Clemson are the ones that I really want to touch on, and the huge thing there was Jordan Travis had to make a couple of big-time plays. He was the guy that, maybe the line would break down and he would make a spectacular play with his legs or would stretch the play out and then throw downfield to one of the talented wide receivers they had. So they had guys. It was one of those things that Jordan Travis had to make some plays that DJ just can't necessarily make at the same clip. And that's something that they're just going to have to be a little bit better about, is they can't just rely on this quarterback to make all of the big-time plays they need to make. He's more of a facilitator, not a game changer, as Jordan Travis is. So you look at that, but then you also look, they need some help at the wide receiver position. I think when you look at last year, they had plenty of big-time players at that wide receiver position and made plenty of big-time plays, but they were a little bit fewer and further between. In that Clemson game, they were coming down the stretch, and it took a couple of ridiculous plays from Keon Coleman down the stretch of that game for them to win that one. So it's overall one of those things that I don't necessarily think they're bad offensively by any means. In fact, they're one of the better offenses in the entire country. I would just love to see it, down after down, drive after drive. They're able to move the ball more effectively. I think the run game is going to help them a lot in that respect this upcoming year. So I do think they're going to be in a fine place offensively, but if they can find that consistency week over week, if they can make sure that they're playing roughly the same level of football on that side of the ball every single week, I think they're going to be in really, really good shape this upcoming year. But overall, there's a ton of different leaps that need to be taken for these teams. Those are not remotely the end-all be-all by any means, but we'll probably continue that throughout the week, add a couple more teams tomorrow. That might wrap it up. We'll decide after that probably, but definitely will be a really interesting thing to watch this year. Can they make that leap? And if they don't, does that mean they have no shot at the title, or can they overcome it? It'll definitely be a fun thing to watch, but let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of fall camp intel, break down some of the scrimmages that happened around the country, but also just some things we forgot to get to last week. So we'll definitely break that down right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the big-time leaps that need to be taken for the title contenders this upcoming year. If they really want to be title contenders this upcoming year, definitely will be a really interesting thing to watch as we go throughout this year. But let's get into some fall camp intel. There are so many scrimmages happening around the country that did happen this past weekend, and a lot of different things that have come out from them. We have a couple of things from last week just to get you guys fully catched up, and then we will probably do almost every day. We'll do fall camp intel because there are so many things that are going to start coming out from around all of the scrimmages all around the country. But where I want to start is at Penn State, and they might have just gotten a huge boost to that offense. When you talk about this offense, really one of the big only worries is that wide receiver room. You have to get more from that wide receiver room, a position group that does not return one single receiver with more than 250 yards from a year ago. So that's a problem. There's no two ways about that. Obviously, you have Harrison Wallace there that they feel pretty good about, and frankly, I think could be a huge player for them. Julian Fleming is someone they like. I don't think he's a wide receiver one, and frankly, I'm not sure if they do either, so that'll definitely be something to watch. But the guy I want to talk to you all about is Taysir Denmark. He is someone that has come onto the scene as a freshman and has immediately started making plays. And Penn State obviously needed this in the worst possible way. A very talented freshman that, frankly, I've talked about this before, relying on freshmen to make all of your plays isn't great. If someone needs to fill in the gaps like Taysir Denmark, I think they'll feel more than fine about that. So Harrison Wallace, Julian Fleming, Caden Saunders all need to come along, and frankly, it sounds like they're having a very good fall camp, but having someone else there is going to be huge for them, and if it's a freshman, then more power to him. He's a very talented kid, so someone that Penn State kind of needed to hit, and it sounds like he is thus far throughout fall camp. Over to Miami, and let's talk about Akeem Isidore, a very talented defensive lineman for them. He was an ACC honorable mention, had 7 sacks a year ago, in 2022, apologies for that. A very talented kid. It's someone that can absolutely make some noise for this team. When you have guys like Tyler Barron, Ruben Bain, and all of the other guys, Elijah Alston also on that edge rushing, when you add someone like this, things could get really dangerous. This could be one of the best units in the entire country when it comes to the pass rush and could absolutely wreak havoc against a Florida team that might have some offensive line troubles, but we'll get into that likely tomorrow when we break down some more stuff. But definitely a very huge thing for Miami. When you look at this pass rush, it already looks really good, but if you add someone else to that group, it could be absolutely terrifying, honestly. Wisconsin is where I want to go to next, and we're going to talk about the two guys in that picture, Tyler Van Dyke and Braden Locke, two very talented quarterbacks that were fighting over that position for a little bit longer than some people thought. I think a lot of people thought that Tyler Van Dyke would ride up there and dominate spring and walk away with the title of starter, and frankly, I kind of did too. Didn't quite happen that way, and that definitely made some Wisconsin fans nervous. It sounds like Tyler Van Dyke is taking that role. It sounds like he is finally taking over that role and is going to be the starter as they head into this season. I think it's one of those things that you need to make sure that your offense is more explosive than it was a year ago, and a year ago, you had Braden Locke under center, so unless he took very big steps forward, I think it was going to be really hard for him to win this job. I think Tyler Van Dyke is a very talented player, someone that obviously has not had the greatest 2 seasons behind him, but when you look back at that 2021 season, there's some special there. There's no two ways about that. Injuries kind of got in the way a little bit, and if he can take firm control of this offense and really run things at a high level, this could be a dangerous group. It's not going to be the most incredible offense in the world or be top 10 or anything like that, but moving the ball and then playing Luke Fickell defense is never a bad way to go about business. So definitely a really big update there. Tyler Van Dyke is likely to be the starter for Wisconsin, and he'll get to face Alabama week 3, which is plenty of fun for him, I'm sure. Going over to SMU, they had a little bit of a quarterback battle going on over there. They brought 2 quarterbacks to the ACC Media Days, which made a lot of people wonder who was going to be the starter as they head into the season. Preston Stone was the starter for much of last year, but then Kevin Jennings, the backup, came in and won the AAC championship for them. So kind of hard to argue with that result, you know. You got to give that guy at least a little bit of a look. It sounds like they feel really good about both of them, which is obviously a huge thing. It's a good problem to have, obviously, when you're deciding between 2 quarterbacks that you feel good about. Now, there are some people that are deciding between 2 quarterbacks they don't feel great about, and they're trying to figure out just which one gives them a better chance to win. I think both these guys could easily win big-time games for SMU this upcoming year, but it does sound like it's going to be Preston Stone. It sounds like he's taken a little bit of a lead in this battle, and frankly, Kevin Jennings is going to play this year. I have no doubt in that, whether it's injury or just getting him on the field because he's that darn good. But I do think it's going to be one of those things that you'll lean on Preston Stone whenever you need Kevin Jennings. He's right there and plenty capable to take those reins. But in week 0 on October 24th, you will likely see Preston Stone trot out there first with the first team offense against Nevada. Then we'll get into North Carolina State. No Rodgers is the story. And frankly, I think a lot of us saw this coming. The transfer over from Ohio State, a very, very talented kid coming out of high school, and he's impressed very early on in fall camp. A very, very talented kid, one of those guys that, as his teammate Kendrick Raphael described him, a freak of nature, and he looks that way. There's no two ways about that. I talked about this a lot on here, but he feels like the perfect addition to this team. I think Kevin Concepcion, who had 71 catches, 839 yards, 10 touchdowns a year ago, an absolutely elite player, might just be a little bit more elite if you have that, tactician route runner in the middle of the field that can take a lot of the running or linebackers' attention, can pull up the safeties a little bit, and just make life a little bit harder on some of these defenses than they had a year ago, where you knew where 10 was, you likely knew where the offense was going for a lot of ways. Now you have to worry about number 10, number 5, and number 11? I can't remember what Justin Joly is wearing. But Justin Joly is getting big-time praise as we head into this season, and another guy that they very much need to hit. And also, Keenan Jackson, the guy in your picture, a freshman wide receiver, another camp standout. So this passing attack could be as scary as ever for North Carolina State, and if Grayson McCall can play that 2021-2022 football that he played at Coastal Carolina, this is an ACC title type team. This is a team that can absolutely play with everyone in this conference and might just leave this year with the best offense in the entire league. So a very, very fun group. It feels like Kevin Concepcion might just not be out there on his own this year. So definitely a good sign for them and all of the transfer guys that they need to hit. It seems like everything's going fairly smoothly up there in Raleigh. Now let's get to Texas, because there's questions around that interior defensive line. After this weekend, they don't feel like they're too big of questions anymore. They feel very, very confident about that interior defensive line. Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton played very, very well in their scrimmage. In fact, it sounds like the defense overall just outplayed the offense. That tends to happen in the first scrimmage of the year, but at the end of the day, still very impressive, still something they very much need. The pass rush is as elite as it looks on paper, apparently. They are getting home pretty much every time, and it's going to be a ridiculous group on that side of the ball. So overall, you lose two massive guys on the interior, and they're very important. Overall, the defensive line could be better this year for Texas, just because of the elite edge rushing in. Some of those tackles like Alfred Collins, like Vernon Broughton, like Bill Norton and Tia Savea coming along a little bit faster than some people might have suspected. So a huge, huge thing for them. And then the safeties on the back end of this defense look really, really strong. Isaiah Makuba got a pick off Quinn Ewers during their spring practice, it sounds like. In fact, it sounds like Quinn Ewers got off to a little bit of a slow start, but once they got into a rhythm, did the two-minute drill, red zone type stuff, he was very, very sharp. So overall, I don't think they need to worry about Quinn Ewers by any means, so I'm not necessarily putting too much into that. But it sounds like the safeties on this team are absolutely incredible. Michael Taft, Jelani McDonald, Derek Williams, and Makuba all making big-time plays for them, and that was the other worry for this team. So if interior defensive line is worked out, and if the back end is worked out, particularly the safety position, they're going to be more than fine. This is a very dangerous team that is going to make plenty of plays. It sounds like Jahdae Barron is going to move over to the corner position and play a little bit there, and has played pretty well there in short amount of time. The one big kind of interesting tidbit that came out of this was Darian Gillette, the linebacker / edge rusher for Texas, has moved over to running back, gotten a couple of touches there with CJ Baxter going down. Could just be a pass pro type guy, one of those really physical blocking guys that you need at that point in time. So definitely a really interesting thing to watch. We'll keep you updated if any more guys move there or if Darian Gillette doesn't end up there. So definitely will be fun to watch that. Over to A&M, they had some very, very bad news this past weekend with Reuben Owens going down during the scrimmage. It sounds like he injured his knee and is going to be out for the season. This is a huge loss. There's no two ways about that. This was likely going to be the starter heading into the season, much like Texas with CJ Baxter. In fact, these two guys were number 1 and number 2 in the 2023 running back class. So two very, very talented guys in the state of Texas will be sitting on the sideline this year. Le'Veon Moss just became that much more important for this team, a huge player this year where it felt like he was going to be kind of a supplemental piece. He might just be the feature back now, so he's got to be ready to roll. And then the other guy I want to talk about here is Cassius Howell, a very, very talented transfer from Bowling Green. When you have Nick Scourton on one side of the ball, if you have someone else on the other side that's terrifying as well, you're going to have a really, really good pass rush. So Cassius Howell, the edge rusher that came in from Bowling Green, has gotten a ton of big-time praise. And frankly, if that's the mismatch that they have against offensive tackles for Notre Dame that look a little bit questionable at this very moment, they might just be able to dominate that game and give Riley Leonard absolutely no chance to get into a rhythm. So a ton of different scrimmage reports that will be coming out over the rest of the day into tomorrow that we will absolutely break down. Frankly, we're going to do a lot of fall camp intel breakdowns throughout this week because there's so many different things coming out as we get a little bit close to the season every day. But let's take our last break here, and when we come back, we're going to do some Monday questions. We're going to get back into Week 1. We did a Week 1 segment a couple of weeks ago. Can't exactly remember when I did it, but we did a couple of questions there. I want to get back into it, do a little part 2 here, and break down some of the other questions I have about Week 1 as we get a little bit closer. So stick with us, and we'll be right back with that. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the fall camp intel. There were a ton of scrimmages throughout the weekend. We did have a tough injury to Ruben Owens over there at Texas A&M and a number of others that came in throughout the weekend. We'll break down a number of different notes throughout the week because a lot of stuff has come out throughout this weekend, so we'll break it down as this week goes on. But let's get into some Monday questions. Let's break down some of the Week 1 questions I have. We did this a little bit ago. If you want to go check out the first segment in case you think, why isn't he asking this? I probably asked it on the first segment, but let's get into this and let's talk about Florida first, because this is one of the most interesting teams in the country. I talked about it last week that they need a Week 1 win, likely more than any other team in the country. And the reason is pretty simple. I think this is a really interesting team that could be dangerous as you get throughout the rest of this year, but they need one very, very important thing, and that's just momentum. This is a team that has a ton of talent. This is a team that has a ton of things that are in place. They need belief. They need to make sure that once they get on that football field against Miami, they know that they can play. And if they walk out the door with a win, then you're feeling really confident as you head into the season. You knock off Miami, an in-state rival. That is a huge boost to your season. You absolutely roll over Samford, and if you don't, you got a whole other problem. But at the end of the day, let's just say you roll over Samford, and then you have A&M coming to town. New head coach, a lot of new things going on there. You're playing in the swamp. You have some confidence going. Maybe you win that one too, and then you have Mississippi. You go to Mississippi State. You get UCF at home. You should be favored in both. That's 5-0. You're 5-0 after 5 games, and you're in a position where you've beaten Miami, you've beaten Texas A&M, you've beaten UCF, you've beaten 3 teams that, frankly, are good teams. They're not necessarily top flight teams or anything great Miami might be, but at the end of the day, those are really good wins and build a ton of confidence as you head into the part of the season that is going to be a nightmare, where you add Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, all of the teams that they play down the stretch. It's not going to be easy. I'm not acting like they're going to roll through that schedule as well by any means, but the best thing for them is making sure that everyone's in a rhythm. If you can get Graham Mertz into a place where he feels incredibly confident when he walks out onto the field and he can execute, and Eugene Wilson and Elijah Badger are running free, and Montrell Johnson is healthy, and some of the depth pieces at running back that seem to be coming along really well are playing really well throughout the season, you're in a position where you're walking in with house money. You're no longer playing, trying to save your coach's job. You're no longer playing to just try to get to a bowl game. You're playing saying, we can put together a really good season. We can put together a really awesome season. Now, we have to go into certain places and play some big-time games, but you have LSU coming to you. You have Ole Miss coming to you. You have a ton of games that kind of go your direction in terms of the home field advantage battle, and you have a ton of things that could line up really well. Now, none of this matters if they lose in week one, because I think that would kind of stop a lot of the momentum that feels like it's happening behind the scenes over there. So, overall, this is one of those teams that I'm not saying they're going to be playoff level. I'm not saying, they're going to, knock the doors off and go 11-1, 10-2 and make the playoff and possibly win a national title by any means. But all to say, everyone feels like they're kind of writing Florida's death note. They're saying, a 5-win season, 6-win season is what they're going to get, and they'll move on from Billy Napier, and that'll be the end of it. What if they get something going? What if they beat Miami? What if they beat A&M? What if they beat UCF and they're 5-0 walking into that Tennessee game that, frankly, they've dominated in a lot of ways over the last 20 years? So overall, I think it's a really, really fun team, one of the most interesting teams as we head into this year. But when it comes down to it, they really just need momentum. That's all they need to be successful this upcoming season. And if they can win that week one matchup against Miami, it is everything to give you that momentum. Another one that I'm watching is Penn State. Are they walking into a little bit of a trap in week one? We talked about this a little bit on last week's show when we talked about one of the Penn State questions as we head into this year. But last year, Penn State won by 23 points. And frankly, when you look at that, you think they blew them out, right? And frankly, to a certain extent, they did. There was never a moment in that game where you were like, man, West Virginia is really going to win this one. There were moments in that game where Penn State did not have full control, though. They went into that fourth quarter only up by 14 points and were able to pull away down the stretch of that game. So overall, I think that's a game that was a little bit closer than some people are realizing, and Garrett Green is one of those guys that just thrives on home field atmosphere. He is one of those guys, I kind of compared him to Baker Mayfield, not necessarily from a play style perspective, but just from an energy perspective. He feels like when he has that crowd behind him, when he has that energy behind him, he just elevates his game to another level. So that could absolutely help him. I think when you look at this game and you look at what Penn State is capable of doing this year, they could walk in and dominate. That is on the table. Now, am I betting that? Not by any means, because I think this West Virginia defense got a lot better from a year ago. I think the running back duo between Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson is going to be as good as there is in the country. I think the Penn State defensive line is going to be more than fine, but if you can run the ball effectively, if you can wear them down a little bit, then you just need a couple of plays down the stretch of that game to make that win. So overall, I think you look at this and you might be catching Penn State at the perfect time with the coordinators still kind of getting a groove. Drew Aller's trying to get into the season. The wide receivers might not be all the way there. And then you have a West Virginia team that feels pretty confident stepping into the season. They have the same quarterback, have the same running backs, a lot of the same wide receivers, feel really good about their defense from a year ago. So overall, this is a game that is a lot more interesting than people are, I think, giving it credit for. Maybe some people are watching this as much as I am, but this is one that West Virginia could absolutely steal. Now, if Penn State goes in there and dominates, we should be looking at that as hugely impressive. If West Virginia steals one, wouldn't necessarily surprise me too much, but that'll be obviously really, really fun to watch there. The other thing we have to talk about is the defenses in that LSU-USC battle. That's the one that everyone's wondering about, how ready are these defenses for that week one matchup? And this is kind of an interesting question because there's two different thought processes here where you have new staffs at both places, and one has, I would lean a little bit more talent when you look at the personnel, but then you look at the other side, I think the coaching level and the ability to play a certain type of football on the defensive side of the ball and still have success is on one side. So overall, I think LSU is just further along. I think you look at the 9-3 record compared to USC 7-5 a year ago, and it shows that a little bit. And it's not necessarily from a personnel perspective, because frankly, I might lean a little bit USC's direction in that respect, weirdly enough. But I think when you look at strength and conditioning, when you look at how ready they are to play those big-time teams that they're going to play, USC can't do that. They're at least not at a place where they have the depth pieces, they have the physicality at the front line that they're going to be able to play. Now, on the other side of that, USC does have something that LSU just doesn't, which is D linemen that could easily be draft picks in the future. Bear Alexander is an absolute elite athlete, someone that is going to make a ton of noise this upcoming year and really needs to for this USC defense to be what they wanted to do. So I think it's a very talented player. And then obviously Harold Perkins on the other side is the headliner for that defense. I think neither defense is going to be elite. I can almost promise you that. Now, I would lean a little bit towards LSU because of the talent of Harold Perkins and because of some of the staff hires they made over there, but USC is not far behind by any means. I don't think this is a, leaps and bounds type thing. This is very, very razor-thin margins here, so I don't necessarily think either unit's going to be incredible. One unit could be a little bit better than the other. I tend to think LSU might be a little bit closer, and by a little bit, I mean a little bit. So definitely will be a very interesting thing to watch, and whoever's more ready on that side of the ball is likely taking home that win. Can UGA start the season with a dominating win is the big question I have, because you look at this game against UGA and Clemson. I think that's the way a lot of people look at it. They look at it as Georgia's going to walk in, maybe not get an Oregon-type win, but get something like that. Get a dominating win and then walk back into Athens, feel very confident about the season they're about to have. I think this is one we should pay a little bit more attention to, because I talked about it last week, where I said this Clemson team just looks a little bit more like the teams that we become accustomed to winning titles at Clemson, where you have a really good D-line, you have a solid O-line, you have playmakers on the outside at wide receiver like you didn't have before. The support staff, the overall staff around Dabo Swinney is much, much higher than it ever has been, at least over the past couple of years. So you feel really good, right? You feel pretty good about this Clemson team, and Georgia probably won't just walk in and be able to outright dominate this thing, because the two worries that UGA has, interior defensive line and secondary, Phil Maffa is going to test that interior defensive line. I absolutely promise you that. And then you have talented freshmen on the outside for Clemson that will definitely try to test that secondary. So overall, I think when you look at that 2021 game, I don't necessarily see this playing out the same way. I do think it's going to be close. I don't necessarily think it's going to be this huge blowout game for UGA, but if UGA does walk in there and wins by 14, 21, 28 points, they're a team that might just be on their way to a third title in 4 years, because this is not a Clemson team that is the Clemson team from the last 2 years. I can promise you that. This is a very different team, and although they won't be a finished product in week one, if Georgia can walk in there and just beat the brakes off them, we're going to have a conversation about Georgia, possibly doing something really special this upcoming year. Finally, I want to talk about North Dakota State, and can they just kill Colorado's momentum in week one? When you talk about this offseason, it feels like a lot of people have momentum, right, going into the season, whether it's Miami or Ole Miss or Oregon. There's a ton of teams that feel really good about what they're going to do this upcoming year. Colorado's right there. I feel like they feel very confident in what they can do this upcoming season. I've seen some fans say they're going to win 9 games, they're going to go to the Big 12 title to possibly make the playoff, a number of different things that have been thrown out there for this Colorado team. They got a team coming in week one that could ruin all of it. And frankly, the big worry that I have for Colorado is the physicality on the line of scrimmage. I don't have the same worry about North Dakota State. They have physicality, and now it is FCS physicality compared to FBS, but I promise you, those guys can play some football, and they can definitely push some guys around. So Colorado could be in an interesting spot here. Now, overall, they're more talented. They have the better quarterback. They have a lot of the better players across pretty much every position. So they should win this one. There's no two ways about that. But there are a lot of people picking this one, and they're not that crazy to do it. And this would be a back-breaking loss. In complete honesty, excuse me. But the reality is this would be back-breaking not because, you can't This would be backbreaking not because you can't bounce back from it, but because you have Nebraska coming into town the next week, or you have to go to them the next week, and then you have CSU coming into town, who gave you a ton of trouble a year ago and is absolutely coming back to win that one this upcoming year. And the thing is, North Dakota State can do this. It's not like one of those games where a million things have to go right for North Dakota State. A couple of things have to go right, no two ways about that, but they're a team that plays really good football. They play very disciplined. They make every right play. They're not going to hand you a lot of things. Colorado might need that a little bit this upcoming year. So it's one of those games that overall, I think Colorado's likely going to win. I'm not going to sit here and say Colorado's going to lose this game. I'm just saying you might want to turn on your TV to this one on Thursday night. I believe August 29th. Yes, August 29th, you might want to turn on your TV for this one, because things could get a little interesting. And if they do, then this Colorado hype, this Colorado juice going into the season that they all love to peddle out there, it could go away very quickly. Let's just leave it at that for the time being. Definitely will be a really interesting thing to watch, and one of those things that there would be a lot of headlines the next day. Let's just leave it at that for the time being. But thank you. That'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Thank you so much for listening. Your support means a ton to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We just have really incredible people doing awesome work across every single sport you could possibly want. So anything you need in the world of sports, come on over to GSMC and we totally have you covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.